Welcome back to MVM. Today we have a Kickstarter preview. This one is for Kingdom Rush Rift in Time, based off the extremely popular mobile app. It's from Lucky Duck Games and a 2 to 4 player game.
Yeah, if you've followed Lucky Duck at all, you know they've done a lot of games in the past based on apps. I'd have to say they've done some big ones, but Kingdom Rush is a giant.
This is a pretty close representation of the actual app itself. It's done really well, and we've played a lot of tower defense games. And this is a good game.
Yeah, and it does it totally differently than any other tower defense. A lot of tower defense games you see often has everything in a central location and everything coming in. This one feels a lot like you'd expect Kingdom Rush to feel.
All right, so the game is going to be scenario-based. It's going to have 10 different scenarios that get progressively more difficult as you play through them. There's also going to be 3 bosses right now that are going to be included. Each player is going to represent one of the heroes that are based from the Kingdom Rush universe, and these heroes are going to have variable different special abilities that they can use in the game. However, the game introduces it to you through scenarios, so you actually don't get the heroes until Scenario 2. Scenario 1 is basically going to teach you how to play the game. And what we're going to do today is kind of give you that overview of those first 2 levels, because once we got to the 3rd level, it's crushing and very difficult, which is great.
Yes, exactly. You want this game to be difficult, and this game gets very difficult. These first 2 scenarios, less so, but still pretty difficult. We've got the Scenario 2 set up right here.
Yeah, so when you look at it, it is modular based, and all these boards are going to pull away. This is always going to be the main board, and there's multiple different main boards, some that may show 2 paths coming through the locations, because just like Kingdom Rush, things are going to be flowing through a path. Sometimes you may have 2 spawn points, sometimes you may have 1, sometimes you might have stuff that will wind around your towers in various different ways. Also, each player is going to come to the game with different building sites.
Yeah, these building sites are probably one of the coolest and most ingenious ways of modularly setting this thing up, because you get these clear static sheets with your player color on them, so that you're able to really set this board up in many different ways. You could have this same board with 3 players, and you're going to put these static sheets around the board signifying where your building sites are. And these things work really well sticking to their square.
Continuing on with the main board, you're also going to have an X number of minions or spawns that are already placed up on the board. When you look at these cards, they're going to be represented by these different types of minion cards that you see here. And they come in 3 different varieties. You have green for easy, yellow for medium, and red for the most difficult. At the beginning of each of the scenarios, it's going to tell you which ones to place and where to place them on the board. When you look at these different spawn locations, they're going to tell you the type of minions that are on that board. The idea in the game is Tetris style. You want to be shooting things at them and covering them up.
Yeah, they've really added this really cool puzzle element to this version of Kingdom Rush. These minions are going to be traveling across the board in these trays, and you're going to be, like Jeremy said, kind of in a Tetris sort of way, doing damage and figuring out exactly how you want to place these pieces, because all the damage you do are going to be in the form of these different shaped pieces.
Each player is also going to have a hero in front of them. Their hero board is going to have a couple different things for information that you need to know. Number 1, it's going to have a place for your actual hero card. This denotes that you've taken an action with your hero that turn. Every hero is going to have a basic ability. That could be a ranged ability. It could be a melee ability that requires you to be on the tile physically with the actual spawn location that you're trying to defeat. Also, you have a place for 2 different special abilities that you can purchase by killing minions on the board. And on the bottom, it's going to show you not only your movement, but also the amount of health that your hero has. Your heroes can die in this game and then respawn, meaning that you are going to be able to refresh some of the special abilities and move your health back up to maximum. And the best thing about this board is it's going to show you exactly all the different steps of the game, and the game is extremely easy to play.
And one other thing that the player board points out are your starting cards. These are tower cards. Everyone's going to start with a number of these from a different varieties that you see here splayed out. These are also going to be the tower cards that you can acquire throughout the game and upgrade as people help you out around the table.
These tower cards come in 4 different types and then 4 different levels. Each of these have different patterns that they're going to be able to shoot up on the board itself. Now, what are you trying to do in each scenario? Again, you're trying to stop these minions from going through the entire course and then getting to your home castle or home base. Every single scenario is going to have a home base that has a value of 7, meaning that anytime any one of these tiles passes through and doesn't have minions covered up, it's going to do that amount of damage to your castle. And once that gets depleted down to 0, you're going to lose. How do you win? Well, it's very simple. At the start, it's going to tell you how to stack the cards that are going to spawn through the course of the game. It's going to tell you what colors to put on top of other cards, but it's also going to introduce one other set of cards, and these are called portal cards. These are the purple cards that you see here. To defeat the actual scenario, you have to defeat all the portal cards in the stack, and these cards introduce more difficult creatures, but they also introduce a new mechanic in the game. That's because each of these portal cards requires you to do damage to it with very specific level towers. And when you do damage to them with those towers get destroyed and placed back into the supply.
But this is going to be a natural way of getting those towers that you've acquired or upgraded out of the game and forcing you to go back through that cycle, getting more and upgrading them.
All right, so let's talk about how to play the game. This is a game that can be played mostly simultaneously, and the very first step is going to introduce that, and that is playing tower cards and playing hero abilities. This can be done by everybody at the same time, and it's going to require a lot of cooperation and a lot of communication between the players. When you play tower cards, you have to play them, number one, on your own sites. That's the building sites that are clear that David's already shown you. Each of these is going to show a pattern on where the missiles or projectiles are being shot from in the exact orientation that they're being shot at. So let's look at one very specifically. This one here is an archer, and it's telling me that I can shoot 1 or 2 spaces away. And the trick is it's always shooting directly in this line that I'm shooting from, and it's telling me what kind of projectile. Now the trick is I can't twist this any way that I wish. It's got to look just like this, and it can be placed on any one of this board or anywhere on this board. It's simply covering up that location. And everyone's doing this simultaneously with all the different towers that they have.
Yeah, so as you can tell, with all the different shapes you're going to be using, there's a lot of conversation that goes on here, because I might have a big L-shaped piece, but I might have to place it in such a way where it only covers up a couple if we're going to use someone else's piece that they're going to use. And you have to remember, when you place these things, there's only going to be certain minion tiles that you can attack. So if there's not a lot out there, you're going to be piling up on one, maybe doing a few damage on another. Just to give you an idea of where the towers go as you upgrade them, this is one of the highest level towers, and unlike the one Jeremy just went over, this one actually shoots in a few different directions and multiple shots, and it introduces the idea of being able to turn and twist some of those pieces as you do that. That's one of the biggest things as you upgrade the towers that you're allowed to do, is actually given that flexibility to manipulate those tiles.
So how do you upgrade? There's 2 other things that you need to know on your turn. One is the heroes and one is upgrading. So let's talk about upgrading first. If you get to a point in the game where you don't want to place any of your towers, and there's going to be times in the game where maybe playing a tower isn't the most opportune thing to do, and also you're going to need to upgrade your towers to defeat some of those portals. So you can give this card to your player on your left and simply put it in this little notch face down. We'll explain what's going to happen here in a moment. That is basically saying, hey, you know what, I'm not going to use this tower, but I'm giving it to you, David, to be able to use in the future. We'll explain that in a moment. Before I talk about the heroes, I want to talk about the other type of tower, and that's the militia. Militias are going to introduce these little militia people onto areas in either 1, 2, 3, or 4, placing it directly in front. And militias are simply going to cover a space for 1 turn and 1 turn only. If you don't have that tile completely covered by the end of the round, that militia is going to go away. But what it does do is it stops the movement of that from moving in the end of the turn.
Yeah, exactly. You do want to manipulate the movement of those minion tiles, because like we said, as they get off the board, that's going to do damage to your base. So the more you can hold them back, the better. Now, if you do hold some back and there's a bit of a bottleneck, they will start to jump one another and still make progress. But whatever you can do to slow that down is definitely something you want to try.
You can also move your heroes. Each hero is going to have a different amount of movement. When you move them, you can move them in any direction you wish, even diagonally, so you can move orthogonal or diagonal. The only thing is you can't stop your movement on top of a tower. Also, when your hero moves, it can actually land on one of these particular areas. When it does, it's going to take a damage from that hero, but it's also covering 4 spaces, which is fantastic. Your hero can also do basic attacks and special abilities. If you've unlocked any special abilities, you can simply flip those over and do that special ability, but all of them have a basic attack as well. Some of them can only damage the tile they're on, and some of them have to damage tiles that they're adjacent to if they have ranged combat.
Yeah, some of the special abilities are going to innately have some of these special shapes that you can use that are probably more advanced than the ones in a lot of the towers. But they're also going to have some special abilities that are a little bit more abstract. For instance, one of mine allows me to, when I am on a tile, like Jeremy mentioned, most times you're going to take damage. But if I use this particular special attack, me and anyone else on that tile is not going to take damage that turn.
All right, so what's going to happen next, once all the players have placed all the towers they wish to place, or they pass any of the cards to the player on their left that they wish to upgrade, you're going to go to part 2, and that is destroy all the tiles where the hordes have been covered completely. If you're looking at this tile, all the spaces on this horde tile have been destroyed. So you're simply going to take that, everything is going to return back to the supply, including all the projectiles that you shot. You're going to pop this out, and you're going to flip it over, and it's going to introduce one crystal that is communally going to go into a pool that you may start with some already. This is going to allow you to buy new cards and do some simple upgrades that we'll talk about in a moment. Then you're going to advance all of the horde trays. Every single tray is going to move one space, pushing heroes into locations. Now the trick is, some of these tiles may actually have double movements on them. So if you haven't covered these by the end of the turn, it's going to introduce more difficult creatures as these things start to fill up the board, meaning that this is going to move 2 spaces. So these are going to be able to leave the path quicker than other ones. Then you're going to go into spawn new horde trays.
Yeah, when you spawn new horde trays, you're going to look over here at how many spawn points you have. And in this case, we have 2. They're in the same location, so they're going to fill this path one after the other. In some other scenarios, you're going to have multiple locations coming from different directions. It gets pretty crazy in the later scenarios, but in this case, you're going to simply add a card to this tray and insert it and continue to do so, pushing the other trays or hopping over them if need be.
Then you're going to upgrade your towers. If anyone has passed you any of the towers, you're simply going to flip that tower over. In this case, I passed David a level 1 mage. He's going to return that level 1 mage back to the supply, then take a level 2 mage back into his hand. That's how you upgrade. It's very, very simple. And you're going to need to do this through the course of the game to be able to take down some of those purple tiles that you see in the game.
Yeah, and this is actually a really cool cooperative aspect of the game too, because once someone starts giving you cards, it just has naturally this thing that's built in that makes you want to give the other player to your left another card. And if you're playing 2 players, you're just giving cards to each other.
Then everyone is going to pick up all the cards off of their building sites back into their hand. So that's right, you're going to be able to replace this on the next round in different locations. Your towers in this game aren't permanent. They're not always going to stay in the same location. So as the tiles start to move through here and the minions start to move, you can kind of decide cooperatively, okay, now this time I'm going to place my archer over here, I need your mage to go over here, and so forth.
You're also going to find out that there's towers that won't really apply in that round, particularly if things have changed. So you don't want to place it. That's the perfect time to give it to your partner.
The final thing you're going to do is you're going to cooperatively decide what you wish to do with the crystals that you have in your supply. There's 2 things you can do. The very first thing, for 1 crystal, any player can buy any one of their special abilities. These are one-time uses until you rest or restore your hero. These have all kinds of huge flexible abilities by shooting on different tiles, flipping those tiles around, and so forth. The other thing you can do is to spend 2 crystals to buy any level 1 tower and give it to anybody.
Yeah, so if you do find yourself running low on towers, this is a moment where you can use those crystals to do just that. Now, these crystals aren't plentiful. Like we said, you might start with some at the beginning of a scenario, but not too many. And then you're only going to be getting maybe 1 or 2, depending on how many minions you've defeated. So that is Kingdom Rush Rift in Time from Lucky Duck Games. We saw this at Gamma, and we did get a chance to see the boss characters. We don't have that represented here, but those look really cool as well.
Make sure you guys check out their Kickstarter for all the final components. If you have any questions, make them in the comments below. Follow us on Facebook, like us on Twitter, and now also on Instagram, and we will catch you guys next time.